Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. This is the second week of May, and the hits continue to roll. We've got record-breaking scores to go over, the beginning of the WNBA season, the regular season, that is. Kraken season in review. The Reign begin their regular season, the end of his hell. Seahawks, kind of some aftermath of the draft a little bit. The Mariners continue their season. Well, I guess that's kind of a capsule mint of everything going on. So with that being said, we've got a ton of stuff to go over. So we will hop right over to the Seahawks.
We have a couple of team notes here. On May 5th, it was announced that the Seahawks will take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Germany on November 13th. First ever regular season game in Germany will kick off at 6:30 a.m. Game will be played in Allianz Arena, home of Bayern Munich. It will be the first major non-soccer event held at the arena. Also on team notes, KJ Wright has spoken with Seattle. Free agent linebacker KJ Wright says he is hopeful to have a reunion with the Seahawks. Pete Carroll says that they have spoken but did not go further than that.
Just to quickly note on both of those. Firstly, 6:30? You're
I
going
know.
to wake up really early for that? I mean, that's Pacific time. East Coast is 9:30, and that's a little bit better. But here in Seattle at 6:30 in the morning to watch that game against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers.
I'm a little crazy, and 6:30 is my normal schedule.
Oh.
So.
Not me. But then with KJ, I don't know how much of that you saw, but it seemed a lot like most of that conversation. KJ talked about, I think, in a guest appearance he did in a media thing, that he was like, "Oh, Seattle knows I wants to be back. Yeah. It's home." It just kind of seemed like last year with the Raiders was just kind of like a one-off. Like, Seattle didn't bring me back, so I'm gonna have to go somewhere, right? And then Pete talked about it, and he said, "Oh, we've talked to him," and then that's it.
I didn't think we talked about a future. No,
especially with going to more of a 3-4 set. People go, "Oh, why wouldn't they bring him back?" You go into a 3-4 set. KJ, as an outside linebacker, is not really a rushing guy, so it wouldn't make sense in that 3-4 defense. It sounded like Pete Carroll might have been talking to him about a future role, like a coaching thing, which I think KJ would be great in a coaching aspect. But that does not sound like what KJ wants to do right now. So it just seems like KJ was like, "Oh, I'm excited." Pete's like, "I don't know about that," because it really seems like they're going with this sort of youth movement, with some of the younger guys, signing Nwosu in free agency, having Jordan Brooks kind of step up and be that guy, signing Boye Mafe. Comment from last week. Just ridiculous. People are annoying. But yeah, so that it kind of seems like the cards are stacked against KJ. I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoy having KJ Wright, and I think obviously his speed is not there, and he might not be where he was athletically a few years ago, obviously, right? As people get older. And he's not that old, but you know what I mean? But it seems like with the youth sort of movement and with the new formation, doesn't seem like it's in the cards. And then with Germany, with playing in Allianz Arena, I think playing in the home of Bayern Munich is like I think the other ones that the NFL will play are all in a different building after this year. So, I mean, cool to be the first major non-soccer event held in that building.
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't know. People are like, "Oh, are you excited?" I don't really care. I mean, I'm not going to be there. It's cool and all, but it's like it's a home. I think we're supposed to be the home team, so we lose a game at Lumen Field, which for years has been it has been a home field advantage, but in recent years it hasn't really. I'm kind of indifferent. I'm like, hey, that's cool. If we played in London, sure, but does it help you if you win that game in the standings? Like extra? No.
Right.
So I don't know. That's how I might get attacked for that, but I don't really care as much. I don't know about you.
Just like you said, I don't really care so much. Like, I do care when games are here in Lumen Field, but as far as playing anywhere else, then it's not such a big deal to me either. What I did think, going back to the KJ Wright, is Pete Carroll's reactions to players saying that they want to come play. It's like he doesn't really entertain it ever, and he's just like, yeah, okay, whatever. So
if we don't like it, we don't really care.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're not on our radar,
cool.
Thanks for the consideration. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so Moving on here, on May 6th, cornerback Kobe Bryant announced that he would wear number 8 to honor, of course, NBA legend Kobe Bryant. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's cool. Obviously, that's his namesake, right?
Yeah.
But I never really like when the league did the whole thing with switching the jersey numbers to where you can basically be anything you want.
Mm-hmm.
And if like last year, I know it was like, hey, if you want to change immediately, you have to buy out your stock of jerseys, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
I get that some people who maybe have Kobe Bryant stickers on their laptop might not like that sort of thing. But again, it's similar to the Germany thing. I'm indifferent. It's like, okay, your number's great. You know, you talk about, the Mamba mentality thing. And I think he changed from 7. I think he wore 7 at Cincinnati primarily until they played Alabama in this college football playoff. And he changed to 8 for that.
Okay.
Okay, I need you to produce. Obviously there's a lot to live up to, not only in the name, right, but in the number now. So not like you're putting the standard on or the bar on yourself, but you kind of are. You see what I mean?
I think you definitely are, especially by having just that last name and that number together.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you're coming into a cornerback room that's we've gone over this several times, right? With the draft, Sidney Jones, Trey Brown last year was a rookie. Justin Coleman, Artie Burns, Tariq Woolen, another guy who a lot of people like as a raw prospect out of this draft. So, hey, man, earn your stripes. Then I really don't care. If just like with Richard Sherman, people always complain about Richard Sherman running his mouth or DK with, getting people's faces and causing shit. If you back it up, I really don't care what you do. I really don't care. If you're a guy, that like Jalen Ramsey, I hate Jalen Ramsey, but it's because he does his job and he gets in people's heads.
Yeah.
It's like in wrestling. If you're a heel, you want people to be pissed off. And if you're pissing people off, you're doing your job.
So at the end of the day, you don't care so much about that, about his number rather than like his performance.
Yep.
Yeah.
If he performs well, you earned it. Cool.
Yeah.
Don't really care,
Sure.
So I'm indifferent to it, but it sounds like you might not be.
No, I mean, obviously in the NBA, the jersey numbers are retired for a reason so that the legends can keep their number. And it just kind of didn't sit well with me that he would in another sport, of course, but still put that combo together. It just felt kind of weird. But moving on here, 4 Seahawks draft picks have signed their rookie deals. Tariq Woolen, Tyreek Smith, Bo Melton, and I'm going to ask for your assistance on that name. I don't want to say that wrong.
Tariq Young.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to be sure. What do you think?
I mean, it's good to see that. Obviously, you don't ever want to get in too many situations where it's like rookies getting a big deal about their signing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, those are sort of the later round guys. It's always interesting to see the numbers because when you talk about offseason cap space, you have to incorporate the rookies. Because if you got a first rounder, that's a couple $1 million.
Right.
Once you get to some of these guys, I'm sure it's not that big, obviously, because the higher the round, the more money, the more initial money you're getting. I'm interested to see like what Cross signs for, right?
Mm-hmm.
What Kenneth Walker signs for,
some of those guys that were higher up in the prospect.
Because that's more of where it's like, okay, that's important. I'm not saying these guys aren't important, but their deals are not going to be as big as the higher round guys.
Agreed. Moving on here, the Seahawks will travel a lot this season. The team will travel the most miles of any team, totaling 29,446 miles. They will cross 34 time zones over their 17-game slate. And they will travel 23,000 miles more than the Steelers, who travel the fewest at 6,442. And Pittsburgh will not leave the Eastern time zone.
That's ridiculous.
So it doesn't sound like there's much of a consideration or like balance when they're choosing how often teams will travel here.
Yeah, and it's tough because we're in Seattle, right? And you're up in the uppermost corner. You're away from everybody. Closest is obviously California. The East Coast teams get it better because you've got the Midwest teams, right? And you've got the rest of the East Coast teams. So like Pittsburgh, I mean, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're not traveling to California at all. I mean, it might be the way their schedule plays out this year.
Yeah, I haven't seen who their opponents are, but
it's it's a little bit weird. and obviously frustrating. And that's something that I think people talk about sometimes. I don't really buy much stock into it. They're like, oh, you're up in the highest corner of the country. People aren't going to want to do that because of the travel. Obviously it hasn't played that much of a, I don't know. It seemed like for the longest time in like the early 2010s that it seemed like when the Seattle would play the 10 a.m. games, they just looked groggy. They looked unprepared.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that they've done better at over the years. They've gotten maybe coming in a few days earlier, getting acclimated, so you're not like jet lagged,
Mhm.
right? But no, I'm really interested to see if we go into like mid-season, right, with all these miles, and you're playing a 10 a.m. game, and you see how the Seahawks just look like they're asleep still. So I mean, it was something to think about. Just like with draft picks, it's like obviously this might look like in the draft case, it might look good now. In this case, looks bad now with all the miles, but I have to see how it plays out because how things look on paper isn't always how they play out. So I don't know, and it doesn't look ideal certainly, but they could overcome it.
Luckily, they play weekly and not like every so often, so hopefully they're able to adjust and that doesn't affect their gameplay. On May 7th, Pete Carroll says that Drew Lock would be the number 1 QB in this year's draft. The Seahawks head coach says that Drew Lock is better than any quarterback in the 2022 draft. Also stated that he does not envision the team trading for a quarterback. And the team reportedly felt that QB Malik Willis was nowhere near NFL ready. Those are some strong words.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we looked at our draft coverage, right?
Mhm.
If we was a quarterback, I was going with Malik Willis.
Mhm.
And obviously, we'll get to some league notes here in a second regarding Malik. But it's interesting. It just seems like since that trade that Pete Carroll and John Schneider have the organization as a whole has really doubled down on Drew Lock. They're like, and they just want to surround him with talent and let him do his thing, as compared to how maybe his situation might have played out in Denver. There's like the stages of grief or whatever, like
Which one
anger,
are you on?
denial. I think I'm in acceptance now.
Okay.
It's like, all right, we have to just accept it. And that just because that's how it seems like it's going to go.
Yeah.
Maybe Drew Lock comes out and he's an average to good quarterback. Okay. But maybe above average. Fine. If he comes out and really disappoints, then the anger will come out.
Mhm.
If we reach week 8 and he's just throwing ducks and just making the bad decisions, then we can, whatever week that is on CSS on Converge, there will be anger. But until then, you just kind of got to let it play out, and we'll see how that goes. But
do you think him sliding as far down in the draft as he did means that other organizations might think the same way?
I think so. Yeah, I think you talked about the draft, right? I know Kenny Pickett. We talked about him getting selected by the Steelers, but a lot of guys, it was like, when is a quarterback going to be taken?
Yeah.
And it was talked about before the draft even happened about the potential of this draft being one of the worst for a quarterback.
Mhm.
Because there's always, it's the NFL draft is usually, if you're a high pick team, you're picking a quarterback. We go back, we talked about the Steelers, right? Mitch Trubisky was a high pick that Chicago traded up for. Trey Lance, Robert Griffin III, Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence, top like 10 picks in the draft are usually when someone goes. I think the Ravens picked Lamar Jackson at 32.
Yeah.
So, usually the first round is somewhere where you take a quarterback. And to hear that this draft was weak in that, bad. And it sounds like next year's draft will be a lot better for a quarterback.
Mhm.
And so maybe I've seen something that says, hey, Seattle lets Drew Lock play out this year, see how he does. And if not, they have a first and a second rounder next year for one of those picks.
Yeah, a good point.
We'll see about that. But no, I'm interested to see, and I want you to look at league news here because it's also telling about Malik. And
yes,
this could just be fire for him. Honestly, it could just be fire.
Certainly. Moving on to league news, on May 3rd, Ryan Tannerhill made some interesting comments about Malik Willis. He said, "I don't think that it's my job to mentor him." Tannehill said that in a press conference. If he learns from me, that's a great thing. I just don't understand how you're a veteran quarterback and you don't think that it's your role to have any sort of mentorship in this rookie QB coming in.
Well, I don't know if this is just me looking at it this way, considering who Tannehill is, but it's not like I'm Aaron Rodgers and I'm like miles ahead of where Malik Willis would be, right? And it's like, oh, this guy who almost like the Jordan Love situation where it's like, okay, is this guy supposed to take my job? What is this? Ryan Tannehill is not like a top 5 or top 10, maybe top 15 quarterback in the NFL, right? He's a guy that kind of what we want from Drew Lock this year. Just be able to do the average job, right? He's never been above average. I mean, look at his offensive line and Derrick Henry, and he had AJ Brown. He's gone now. He had Julio Jones. I don't know how much of that Julio, I think he's a free agent right now.
I think so, yeah.
But he's got a good supporting cast, and he performs well with a good supporting cast, So
you think he sees it more as like he doesn't want to create competition for himself?
I think so, but I think that's going to come anyway.
Yeah.
And for that sole reason, I would like Malik Willis to beat him out.
And you're not the only one. I can't remember who it was that tweeted that, but there was certainly a tweet that someone felt strongly about Malik taking that position from him. Moving on here, Adrian Peterson will get help. Longtime NFL running back and former Seahawk Adrian Peterson will undergo 20 sessions of both domestic violence and alcohol counseling following his arrest at LAX. So I think that's our first update since it happened. Finding out that he got arrested. Yeah. So good thing that he's getting help. That's all we can really hope for someone that's struggling with something like that. So on May 5th, the Cleveland Browns, it was announced that the Cleveland Browns are unwilling to negotiate Baker Mayfield's release. And there's belief in that they don't want to pay him that 5th-year option that they previously guaranteed. Mm-hmm. So I think they're trying to get away with not having to give him so much money here.
Yeah, I would just prefer him that he stays anywhere away from the Pacific Northwest.
Sure.
Go anywhere else.
I mean, and I think he's one of the guys where I don't think Pete Carroll showed very much interest.
It's one of those things where I want to be there. Pete Carroll's like, cool,
All right. Moving on here. Laker legend Magic Johnson has joined the bid for the Denver Broncos. He has teamed up with the 76ers co-owner for an attempt to purchase the team. Currently is already an owner. He's part owner of the LA Dodgers and the LA Sparks. So this is interesting to me because I can admit that this was the first time that I read that someone is trying to buy Denver. I didn't know there was a potential.
I remember there was something that kind of got swept under the rug about them getting put up for sale, but I didn't pay much stock in it because this was before Russell Wilson got traded to Denver.
Yeah.
It was like, it's the Broncos. Meh, so like if it's another team, like unless it's in the NFC or the NFC West, I don't really care too much, but that is, I know it's kind of interesting to see a lot of and we have it more when we get to the rain segment about like players in different leagues being part owners of other teams, which is interesting, but not that much stake in it for me, at least.
If anything does pop up, then for sure we will make sure to let you guys know. Raiders ex-president has also spoken out. Dan Ventrell says that he informed the NFL of a hostile work environment, and he was later fired by Mark Davis in retaliation. Surprised that's barely coming out, to be honest, considering that it was a retaliation case. But
all the stuff in Las Vegas with the Raiders, what an organization.
Yeah. Well, I'm not very fond of the Raiders right now, so we'll move on.
Okay, fair enough.
On the 6th, a warrant was issued for Earl Thomas's arrest. Former Seattle Seahawks free safety is reportedly facing a felony arrest warrant after police said that he violated his estranged wife's protective order multiple times. So he's not the one that said that he wanted to make an appearance back in the NFL.
Yes, he did.
That was the player. Okay.
That was a few days. So a few days after he said he wanted to be back, that comes out.
Oh,
all I can say on that is what a waste. Just a waste of a career. Yeah. I mean, it's like there was that situation. I mean, he was doing decently well in Baltimore, with the Ravens, and then all that stuff with his brother happened, and then it just kind of all went down.
He's definitely had a weird personal life after, I think.
One way to put it.
On May 9th, Sherman is eyeing a TV spot, and longtime Seahawks corner is reportedly in deep talks with Amazon for a broadcasting role. And that is something that I think I would like to see.
I think he'd do really well. Richard's obviously a really smart guy, went to Stanford, always had a great football IQ. I know that he said he's still like keeping the playing aspect of it open. But it'll be interesting to see. I would like to see that.
Yeah.
Like you said, I would like to see Richard Sherman in that sort of role.
And looking ahead, all we have left on our Seahawks list here for looking ahead is rookie minicamp. So that should be coming up soon.
Minicamp taking place. And then I think on the 12th, the league schedule officially goes live. So we'll obviously look at the way that plays out. But I mean, that's kind of like a housekeeping thing. It's like when we'll play who, but obviously you can look at when the bye week is because that's important. If you get a late bye week, good. But yeah, not too much going on. Obviously, the mini camp, and I don't think we'll see too many like the undrafted guys get whittled down yet. But certainly an important time for them, right?
Definitely.
Because they're fighting for their spot.